And a lot of times, people also say, well, then you're taking away their traditions and things like. And I think that depends on the community, right? Like if communities themselves say that they want electricity access, who are we to say that they shouldn't have it, right? It's actually not on us to say that. But a lot of times when we look at rural communities, they want to maintain their lifestyles, their traditions, at the same time also have electricity access. It's not either or. They want both. And that's what we should be, sort of getting on board with.
The following is a long open conversation with Ayu Abdullah, an aerospace engineer, an oil and gas professional, and an energy entrepreneur who is the Managing Director of COMET and also the co-founder of Energy Action Partners. She also is the only Malaysian in 2017 to be selected by the US Department of State for the International Visitor Leadership Program to highlight achievements in the field of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We got a chance to sit and talk about many topics, like what is decentralized energy grids? What are the orbital dynamics? Which are her ventures in USA, Malaysia, and the Emirates? And also her current efforts to connect electricity and society in Southeast Asia. This is On the Lawn with FVR podcast. If you like this thing, feel free to like and subscribe and to contribute to the channel on the description below. And now, your featured presentation. Let me do this a little more. And usually, that's how the podcast usually goes. Sometimes we just talk, or we just pretend that the camera is not here.
Okay.
But the main point is that just share the idea, and if you want to do something like today, something happened, like you just say to the camera, today a new release is coming.
Okay.
So, whenever you feel ready, we can start.
Okay. I might need you to prompt me a little bit to just get the juices flowing and I think about what I'm gonna share.
Absolutely.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of On the Lawn with FVR. Today we have Ayu. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
So, such a hot day, sunny day here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Is this happening every day or there are also rains in between?
There's definitely rain in between, but this is an unusually hot spell.
Oh.
So for the past month or so, it's actually been quite warm. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's good to know. I remember in the past it was like usually it rains, but then you have the hot days. Now all of a sudden we have this prolonged spell. That's how you call it, spell,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. People may be watching you and they will be asking, who is this person? So I would like to ask you, can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Ayu, and I am from a small island in Malaysia called Penang. That's where I grew up. I studied aerospace engineering in university. I started out my career in oil and gas in the energy sector. After spending some years trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I sort of went into aerospace really wanting to study aerospace engineering and thinking that I was going to make a career out of it, and then found myself actually in a PhD program and realized that it wasn't what I wanted anymore. I wanted to work on other issues. I wanted to work with my hands. I wanted to work with people, and so I left. I left my PhD graduate research program and moved into energy. Started out in oil and gas, and then after a while also felt like that wasn't quite the right fit, and traveled a bit and then kind of fell into this world of energy access and renewable energy. And so that's what I do now. I work on energy access issues globally, specifically using decentralized mini-grid systems for energy.
Decentralized mini grid systems, oil and gas, and aerospace. It sounds like 3 different lifetimes.
Yeah, there are 3 different lives. I think I've lived quite a number of different lives in different places. I think I've been quite fortunate, or rather, in your youth you jump around, not quite sure what you want to do, and then but this I've been doing this for over for close to 15 years now. Yeah.
Now, I would like to start with young Ayu,
Okay.
who is in Penang, and all of the students decide to study aerospace.
Mm-hmm.
So, how that came about?
I think I always had an interest in science fiction. And in Malaysia, I think a lot of parents usually tend to push you into the science stream. So young girls and boys everywhere are always sort of pushed into these traditional sort of engineering, medicine, all these types of fields, right? So I studied sciences in secondary school, and I really enjoyed math and physics. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not adventurous enough to be an astronaut, but I think engineering would suit me just fine. And so that's kind of why I went into aerospace, and I really wanted to study something out there, like in space. Yeah.
Now, aerospace. I'm from petroleum engineering. So, when you mention aerospace, do you do spaceships? Do you do air fighters? What do you do with aerospace?
Yeah, so I mean, in my university career, my specialization was in orbital mechanics, and so it would be around. This was several lifetimes ago, but
Okay.
I was working. My interest was in sort of orbits and space dynamics and getting spaceships. I guess spacecraft, not necessarily spaceships. The satellites would work too, from one spot to another, right, in space. Yeah.
I guess right now I'm sitting with an expert who can tell me a little more about the Starship. What are your thoughts about that thing that all of the students went into the sky?
The
Starship by SpaceX.
Oh, okay. It has been a long time since I've been in
Uh huh.
the aerospace field, but I mean, I still do believe that space exploration is very crucial to the human story. I think on two fronts. One is just the curiosity to explore beyond our Earth, and then the other is definitely the technologies that come out of it, right? Um, when I went into oil and gas and saw the kinds of technology that was being used in drilling, it to me it was actually quite interesting thinking of, well, this is three-dimensional drilling. I mean, that's where we're at now, right? We no longer just drill directly down, we can drill in different directions. And I thought that, I mean, it used a lot of the math, the same math that you would use in orbital mechanics, right? You're moving where you don't know where you're going, and you're plotting paths and things like that. So I thought that actually, yeah, this is probably coming from exploration, right, in space. So the technology that we develop is definitely a lot of times applicable, and we could go so much further, right, with space technology.
Now, you study this aerospace in Purdue.
Yes.
So, for the people who are more familiar with the NFL, Purdue University is home of legend quarterback Drew Brees,
Okay.
but also has aerospace. So, how was your time in Purdue University?
Oh, Purdue's called the cradle of astronauts.
Uh-huh.
Neil Armstrong was
Uh-huh.
from Purdue, and a
Yeah.
lot of different astronauts. I mean, we have a whole wall. Um, I enjoyed the academics,
Mm-hmm.
the rigors of and a lot of the learning, spending so much of my time in the labs, right, and with the professors. I really enjoyed that. What I didn't realize when I was young was that I should have also enjoyed all the other things, all the extracurricular activities, societies. I didn't do enough of that. And so I felt like I was a bit of a geek when I was in university. Yeah, so I just kind of focused on the academics.
But it's fine. It's fine because right now a lot of people that are in MIT they may focus on some stuff, and sometimes they are like, wait a second, you have the rowing academy right there outside the Charles River, or even the Modi Charles, which is a bar that also happens to have pictures of the astronauts that came from that school. Now, once you got your degree, you decide to also go for PhD.
Mm-hmm.
So, how was that call to say, this is not enough, I want a PhD?
Yeah, I think it comes from so my father's an academic, and so I think some of that definitely came from the expectation that you would always try and go the furthest in your education. And so to me, it was just a natural progression of, okay, I finished my undergrad, I would continue to a master's, and I would continue to a PhD, which I did. But then, 1 year into the PhD program, I realized this is not quite me. I think, while I enjoyed kind of getting the grades and learning all those things, I realized that it didn't quite fit how I wanted to spend my life. I didn't see myself just continuing in that field, and so that's kind of why I left. It was a bit of a wake up call. Yeah.
That's fascinating because usually a lot of people that enter PhD sometimes they go for a full life in academia, full tenureship, or sometimes they go for positions in the let's say academic industry, which is literally R&D. And you mentioned it was around the 1 year.
Yeah.
Usually, when the PhD program starts, it's around okay. You have the first year, and then you have to do the qualifiers.
The quals, yeah.
So
that was
before,
the wake up call. Yeah.
Oh, so the qualifiers were the wake up call.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right before quals, and realizing that this is going to set me up for the rest of my life, right? As to, like you said, like an R&D career, and a career in academia, and that's when I started to realize I think this is not the right fit for me. Yeah.
And once you realize that wake up call, which are the other options that you found back then?
Yeah, I took a semester off, just to kind of think through. Okay, I knew that it wasn't what I wanted, but I didn't quite know what I did want. So I took a semester to think it through and looked at different options. And I decided to, well, I know that a career in oil and gas would give me the means to travel and to see a lot of things, and so that's why I applied for an oil and gas position. Yeah.
And I believe there were many firms back then. So which ones were the one knocking the door that say, yeah, we want you?
Oh, I ended up going with Schlumberger.
Oh, look at that! It's Schlumberger people.
The big blue, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So how did they treat you?
I think Schlumberger is a good company. They treat their people well. They give good training. It's a big family. I think it was, in terms of working for Schlumberger, it was a good experience. Yeah. It was the industry that I thought, oil and gas isn't really it can be quite dirty, like
Allegedly.
environmentally damaging, and on all of this you see firsthand, right, when you're in the field. Yeah.
Now, the moment that you decided to go with the Big Blue, which division they were open for you?
I was in DNM. Yeah.
So they sent you to the wireline and the end?
DM.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So not wireline. Yeah. So I was in China.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So, which oil fields in China you were?
I'm not allowed to say. Yeah.
That was a catchy question.
Yeah.
You know Big Blue, we know you, so it's fine.
Yeah. Even though it's been over 10 years, but yeah.
It's fine. You are allowed to say that.
Yeah. I'm allowed to say that I'm not allowed to say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, given your experience in China and that you were in Purdue, the big family of Big Blue, how it came across, because I believe the same family you started at the beginning was not the same time when you decided to move on. How was that transformation for you?
As in, like, when I was leaving Schlumberger? Or?
Yeah, because it's not the same person that enters, that the same person that leaves.
I'm not sure. I've never thought of that. I thought that when I left, and I only spent 1 year, but you go to oil rigs, so you get quite a lot of good experience. And I think the experience definitely, I think it's always a good experience to, like, even now when thinking back and when I come across sort of the next generation of energy practitioners, I think that it was always a good thing that I worked in a big company, because you learn processes, you learn workflows, you learn structure, um, and you get to see how a big company operates, right? And with so many different moving parts. So I always thought that it was a good experience, and I take that into whatever I do now, even though now I have a small company and things like that, but I see the benefit of good structures, good workflows, taking care of your people and things like that. Yeah. Um, but but yeah, I didn't like the oil and gas industry.
Did you still miss the blue overall?
Yeah. I still have them, like
Hey, welcome to the club.
and my boots. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
my boots and my helmet and everything. Yeah, I still have them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are a good souvenir, I
Yeah.
have to say.
Yeah. So
So you were here with the Big Blue family, and then what happened after?
I travel a bit. Just kind of. I mean, working with Schlumberger, I one of the things that I really wanted was to see the world, and I got to see that when I was posted to different places. But I wanted to see more, so I spent another year traveling, and then landed in Somaliland.
I can see the eyes of an astronaut, the eyes of an explorer right here, like the hunger to go beyond the stars, to go beyond the horizon.
Yeah.
So what have you seen during that time after Schlumberger that made you say, I should go back to this place, or I should record a tip to say, hey, you're going there, check this out.
Oh. Huh. Like where do I think are definitely must go places?
Mm-hmm.
So this was not during my time after Schlumberger, but I think Ladakh in India is one place that if you have the chance, you should definitely go. So it's similar to like Tibetan culture, but it's Ladakhi culture. Very very friendly, beautiful people, very beautiful landscapes as well.
Oh.
In the mountains, deserts in the mountains, yeah, and bright glaciers and things like that. So definitely Ladakh.
Okay, I guess I have to start
Yes.
writing that down.
Yep.
And right after that travels, I remember that you also became a fellow. Well, there are so many fellowships that you already have. But one of the most notable that I checked is that you happen to be one of those space fellows in 2017.
So I was an IVLP for the U.S. State Department.
So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so the IVLP has many different themes, and the one that I was selected for was female leaders in STEM, and so it was actually based. It was inspired by the Hidden Figures movie.
I'm aware of that one.
Yeah, so I was selected to represent Malaysia. They gathered almost 50 women from around the world.
So you're 1 out of 50.
Yes, I'm one out of, I think our cohort at 48. Yeah, so yeah.
That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, representing Malaysia. And we had 3 weeks of a lot of exchange. We traveled to the US, to different places, just a whole lot of knowledge exchange around STEM and leadership. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that you were with 48, 49 more people. So, across those people that you met during that time, what remembers you the most?
The people. I mean, the other women in the cohort, for sure. It's difficult now to remember the different meetings that we had in the US with the different organizations, although I remember, the organizations that we met. And then I definitely remember where we went. We were hosted by National Geographic. We got to visit 21st Century Fox and different space centers. So that was definitely appealed to my younger side. But the most valuable thing that I took away was this membership among the 48 women and the different the different things that they're doing in different parts of the world. Very amazing. And actually, I was in the Netherlands last week, and I actually met with a fellow cohort member who has become a really good friend, and she's a cybersecurity expert in the Netherlands.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's
so friendships like
amazing.
that, yeah, are really amazing.
Yeah, that's the actual power of the fellowship.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and knowing that if you were to be interested in any field, right, and you can call upon this membership, and there would be someone in that field working on it. Yeah.
That's very powerful, I have to say, and I cannot stress this enough how powerful this is, to have a fellowship of common-minded individuals, and it's like anytime you pick the phone, yeah, I got your back, or it's like let's do this.
Yes.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
Now, talking about remarkable things, do you have the experience of aerospace and also experience in drilling? I want to go a little back in the past, but not too much. I don't want to reveal my age, not revealing the age of anybody who's watching this. What are your thoughts about that Bruce Willis movie,
The Armageddon. Yeah, that I would have been a perfect person to go on that mission. Yeah, I think about that all the time.
Okay, tell us, what are your thoughts about that movie? Is because some people say it's scientifically correct, other people say, okay, this is a catchy movie to identify some mistakes. What are your thoughts about that one?
I mean, I've never actually sat down to run the numbers and do the modeling, so I can't really speak to the scientific. I mean, it's a movie, but but I think that I think the appeal of the movie is the fact that it's a they pulled a common man team right together to save the earth.
They were somewhere in the Gulf,
Yes,
right there.
yeah, and they pulled them out of there to save the world in space, and that's just what makes it so much fun.
I remember one of the most impactful scenes was they went to check the machines and they realized that everything was wrong.
Yeah, yeah. And
Everything
then-
was loose. This is not good. The bits are not drilling.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's another movie though around the same time, Deep Impact.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there's those two movies also that kind of came out and are almost parallel.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean I prefer Armageddon for the whole like Hollywood feel to it with the with the big romance
Uh huh.
between Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler. Yeah.
Uh huh.
But Deep Impact was also an interesting movie.
Yeah, Deep
Yeah.
Impact was also good.
Yeah.
So one was selling what is going outside the plan, and the other one was selling what is
Yes.
going to happen to the
Yes.
plan.
Yeah, because it showed a lot more scenes on Earth, right? Like when it actually came to when it
Oh,
arrived
yeah.
and devastated. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's like, okay, what happens if we don't have Bruce Willis in this universe?
Yes.
Well, you have a you, right? Send a you to do that.
Sure. Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm fit enough though to go to space, but yeah,
Hey, we will never know.
you never know. Yeah.
Now, after your travels with the memories of the Big Blue, you decide to start a company, right? So, can you tell us a little more about how you realize I have that knack for entrepreneurship and I want to do this?
So after I left Schlumberger, I traveled a bit, and then I was in Somaliland, and I was there for more than a year and a half, and I was teaching. First, I started teaching at university level, then at secondary school level, and it was then that we were living off grid, and the school founder had bought a wind turbine and wanted to install it, and that was my first foray into off-grid renewable energy. And from there, I realized that, well, this is something that I can do. I mean, because I have an engineering background, I have a strong interest in international development issues. The space of energy access is kind of in between that, right? Like it's overlapping these two big sectors. And that's when I realized, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to work in off-grid renewable energy. And I know what it's like to live off grid, and I've seen what it's like when communities don't have it, and I also know what it could do for communities, right? We're talking about education, health, even banking, right? Like now banking is all online and things like so financial inclusion, all of these things. So then I actually went back to school. I got another degree looking at energy systems, and I focused my research on community energy systems. And through my field work, I went back to Malaysia. I came back here. I spent some time in Sabah with some energy practitioners there, and that's when sort of further cemented that okay, this is what I really want to work on. And so then when I left, I started a non-profit organization with my advisor from graduate school, who's my co-founder, and that was more than 10 years ago, and that's where the experience comes from. And then very recently, we've transitioned our nonprofit into a startup because we want to have more scale, and we've developed our own approaches and a software coming out of our work with community energy systems, and that's where we are right now, at this sort of early stage of our startup. Yeah.
So you mentioned Somalia, you mentioned you were teaching in high school, and then the wind turbine to start connecting the dots. You also saw something when a society is out of the grid and when they are connected to the grid.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you are literally time traveling, because one of the things that we have right now, we have electricity.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot have this without an efficient power grid.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden we have to be full of candles. So how is the feeling of time traveling? Like how do you feel to be in a society that doesn't have electricity and you empower them to have electricity?
I always feel a little well, it kind of depends as well on the community, for sure. I strongly believe that communities are not necessarily communities are off-grid, right? It depends on who they are, what their values are, what they want for themselves in terms of development outcomes. No one can tell them, right, that you guys are living in poverty. I mean, it's kind of up to the community to define it for themselves. But what I do feel is I get very upset when it's not a difficult problem to solve. And it's this is more apparent here in Malaysia, where we are, in West Malaysia, we're 99% electrified, and then we have these, my rough estimate of about 200 to 400 villages in West Malaysia within road access, grid access, all of that, but yet they don't have access to all of that.
Okay.
So that makes me upset. So I actually get quite upset and like sort of well, why haven't we done this yet? And I understand all the complex issues and why, but it just still boggles the mind because we're in the 21st century. I mean, we should be able to do this. Yeah. But then what I like doing, and I think this is what drives me the most when I in my work, is working very closely with communities to figure all those solutions out. It's never a case of we go in and we tell them what should be done. It's always we partner equally with them. I mean, this is how we want to work, right? This is our ideal setup. Is we work very closely with the community. Community is able to articulate what they need, what they want. We have resources that they might not have access to, and we're sharing that access. And then they are coming up with their solutions, and they have ownership of it. And then what we get out of it is also we learn from them. We learn about how communities live differently from the urban areas. We learn about their values, we learn about their traditions, their institutions, which I think a lot of times we in the urban areas don't think about or forget. They've got, not all rural communities, of course, but most have a natural connection to the environment. And all of these things which I feel like we've kind of lost or we don't think about in the urban cities.
Yeah, I resonate with you in that because Tim Dillon, comedian from New Jersey, he has in one of his episodes a line, "Life in the big city." And it's like, it really encompasses what usually happens in the metropolis and everything, and at the same time, excludes you from the life in the nature. this is also what some other people gets tired of the life in the big city, because it's like, where is the natural connection? And of course, everything is a trade-off. So sometimes you can only exchange as much as you can tolerate. Now, the societies that decide to be as a choice on their own, well, of course, everybody respects that. But I really like how you really want to connect and make the 100% for the West Malaysia. Now, what about East Malaysia? What have you seen there?
Yeah, so in East Malaysia, in Sarawak, the local utility is very aggressively connecting rural areas. So they've got a Sarawak rural electrification scheme, and they're using decentralized systems. So a lot of times it's solar mini grids, sometimes it's micro hydro. They may not be hitting all the communities because it depends on whether the community is also recognized as a community by the government and things like that.
So there is a definition of what community is.
Sometimes there are certain villages that are not recognized by census and things like that. But they're doing something, and I think that they're in terms of the numbers, they're doing a good job. In Sabah, there are about 400 villages or so that are still unelectrified, and that equals to a huge population. It's like almost 200,000 people. But the state government does work with sort of local civil society organizations. I think that there's a bigger sort of grassroots movement in Sabah that is sort of acknowledged and recognized and respected. And so actually there's a consortium that's been working with the state government to develop a new rural electrification delivery program to hit the remaining 400 villages. So that is an initiative that has been ongoing for the past 2 years. They started out with a roadmap of kind of finding and identifying where these communities are. Now they're in the stage of working very closely with the state government to develop and design. Okay, so what could this look like? What are some of the policies that need to change? New regulations, new guidelines. There was just the Sabah electricity supply. Previously was governed by federal, and so there was an Electricity Supply Act that covered West Malaysia and Sabah. Sarawak has always had their own, but recently they've started to transition that governance back to state level, and I think that this was the bill in Parliament was just passed, and so and as of this year there has been a new Sabah State Energy Commission. So this all means that there's an opportunity now for the state on its own to basically develop its own energy access solutions and approaches, and I think this is all very positive. So I'm actually quite excited to see what's going to happen in Sabah. Yeah.
And I can't remember if my memory still allows me to do that. When you came to this building to do your lecture in one of the classes of energy, and it was very granular, the details that you mentioned about what is going on in East Malaysia and also in other places. There is this other place that I would like to ask you if you want to discuss a little more. Nepal.
Nepal.
So what is going on there?
Oh, Nepal. So as an organization, we have started working in Nepal. And we're quite excited to work in Nepal. So, because Nepal is a mature microhydro market,
Okay.
so they have over 1,000, depending on who or how you define the systems, but they have over 1,500 operational microhydro systems. Some people say it's closer to 1,800.
Okay.
And when you think about it in terms of global numbers, the World Bank estimates that for an energy access context, we have about 20,000 mini-grids worldwide. So 1,500 is not a small number, right, out of that 20,000. So
it's literally 1 out of 20 in the whole world.
yeah, so in terms of what Nepal has done, it's quite cool to think about it in terms of how they've scaled and things like that. Of course, these systems now some of them are 10 years plus there's also, so they could use upgrades and kind of revisiting to make sure that it really is delivering the level of access that communities want. And this is the effort that's going on right now. The government is in partnership with UNDP. They have a center called the AEPC, the Alternative Energy, I think it's Promotion Center, and they're going out to visit all these sites to see what's going on now, and then the government is also pushing clean cooking. So yeah.
A little pause. Clean cooking. So it's because they cook and clean, or they use a certain energy that is clean. Define clean and cooking.
Yeah, so I mean, within our space, clean cooking would be cleaner fuels for cooking. So not dependent on traditional fuels like firewood, and fuels that are based on fossil fuels and that have both environmental and also health impacts. Yeah.
Now, I want to offer a pushback because I saw this many times, especially in the Houston rodeo competition. They say don't use coal or don't use a specific wood because it has a flavor. And everybody who enters the barbecue competition, they have to do it with natural gas. So everybody has that level, and you see the art of the chef. Sometimes you win the barbecue in the Houston rodeo contest, not because of the main dish, but because of the side dish. What I mean to say is that you see the art in the flavor when everybody uses the same fuel, which is really hard to get.
Yeah.
Now, when we are using these clean energy sources for food, I believe there is an impact in the flavor of the food. How do people react to this?
Yeah. So when we talk about energy access, there actually is two main kind of areas in energy access. One is electricity, and the other is clean cooking. And when you talk about numbers, there's about 700 million people right now without access to electricity, but there's over 1.3 billion people without access to clean cooking. So it's a big issue.
Okay.
Yeah. So and I think that one of the reasons why it hasn't been as easy a problem to solve, and I mean, this is, there are many reasons why, but one is cooking is more cultural than say electricity, right? Electricity is quite basic, and even though there are some cultural aspects to how you use electricity, it generally follows the same sort of ladder, or like everyone would start first with basic lighting, and then everyone would move to mobile phone charging, and then depending on where you are, geographical context and all that, maybe it's fans that are more important, maybe it's fridges, or maybe it's heating, things like that. But for cooking, it's so cultural that to get people to adopt a new way of cooking means you really need to understand the local culture and context. And like you said, it needs to deliver the same flavor, the same, all of that. So it's a tougher cookie to crack, right? When you're talking about clean cooking. Yeah. So but it's very critical because there's so many people without access to it, and it really does impact health-wise and all that. So I would say that it depends on how the energy practitioners are approaching it in the specific countries. For example, there's a group out of the UK called MEX. I think it stands for Modern Energy Cooking Services, if I'm not mistaken. They do work in Nepal, they do work in Myanmar, they do work in sub-Saharan Africa as well. And I think each country, the approach is different because it's a very cultural thing. And so you would have different recipes, you have different cook stoves, different fuels, different everything, right? It's not so easy to scale these approaches across different geographical boundaries and contexts. Yeah.
I see the point that when you really want to feed 1.3 billion people that have historical problems to access energy, then a compromise can be done. Of course, flavor is always a big deal. Like here in Malaysia, everybody wants to sell me, oh yeah, the Malaysia food and everything is spicy. And it's like, Bangladeshi food is more spicy, you know? And it's like, yeah, but we have good food. And it's like, well, Thailand food can be better. And then we have discussions back and forth. But the flavor itself is something that is so coveted at times. But at the same moment, hey, maybe we can do a compromise. Now, going back to food and energy, what else have you seen the impact of the clean cooking besides the flavor and besides the nutrition?
I mean, definitely, cost is always a big issue, especially with rural communities. It needs to be something which they see the costs and the benefit. It's that they value it, right? So, um, and it doesn't have to be only in monetary terms. It can be in time, it can be in effort, and things like that. So, I think access to clean cooking also affords many communities time savings, cost savings, and things like that. So it is an important thing. Yeah.
And also, the access to clean energy through these grids has an ethical point because you are supposed to give energy to the ones who has been historically trying to get this and for some reason didn't have. I mean, if we want to see the other side of the coin, it will be unethical to give this particular access to grids to people who want to only mine Bitcoin.
Yes.
So, can you explain a little more? Because many people may say, wait a second, do you need electricity to do Bitcoin or things like that?
Yes.
Maybe you have seen a little more of what has been going on out there.
Yeah, I mean there aren't many people who do it. I do know companies who put in mini grids in sort of sub-Saharan African context and then use it also to mine Bitcoin. Um, it's an interesting idea. I mean, I'm not against it as long as it's still serving the communities, and it's another source of funding. So I mean, like you said, like there's an ethical component to this, but unfortunately, it is not prioritized. People would still, in their national agendas and their transition policies, they will always still prioritize the urban areas or areas with higher population densities, right? And the ability to pay as well, and to be paying consumers. And so, rural electrification or energy access is not usually the priority. And so, if things like Bitcoin and all of that can raise the awareness and increase some visibility, I think it's not terrible, even though I myself am questioning, well, it's kind of a funny thing to prioritize over energy access. But
all of a sudden you sound like a presidential candidate, either RFK Jr. or Governor DeSantis, who are always pro Bitcoin. But putting that aside, I can put an example of what happens in Odessa or Midland in Texas. They have a mandate that the gas that you don't use, you produce oil and gas, and the gas that you cannot store, you are supposed to flare it, so you burn cash. So what they do is, they put that gas and they just power a turbine to mine Dogecoin. So there are towers that are actually drilling, and they call them Dogecoin 1 or Dogecoin 2, and they are mining Dogecoin. And at the same time, instead of flaring the gas, they are just doing this.
yeah,
Which is, I guess, a way to be a little greener instead of burning the whole gas and get something in return. Okay, but it's part of the rural area
yeah,
because most of the electricity grid that we have here is focused onto the main cities. And now, given that this work has been helping to connect many communities, how long has been this going on, and what impact have you seen in those communities who started until today?
Well, I mean, I've been working in this space for over 10 years, and so I definitely, communities that I started working with over 10 years ago, definitely keep in touch with them and follow their journey. And there are many impacts of electricity. The thing is, people are always asking me, "Oh, you've got to have like a rigorous impact evaluation in order to be able to say this." I I mean, for the purpose of grant funding or continuing our commercial side to things, that's the way people think, right? They want numbers, they want to be able to see all these things. But I mean, I think you can just take a look at communities and see the ones that have electricity. They have they are able to participate in activities like education, um, even just a simple thing like being able to watch TV. Um, that in rural areas, gives kids windows to the outside world. It means it means political agency. It means being able to participate in what's happening in the rest of the country. They can now watch news. They can now, for example, if you are a rural village and your kids have never been to the city, and you study in school, even though they go to school, public schools, um, in public schools they'll teach you things like how to take a train, how to do that, but these kids have never seen a train before. But now they have TV, they can see what a train looks like. They can kind of experience that, through a TV, and it makes a big difference. It means that they have opportunities that weren't there before, and like I said, like political agency also means that they now are aware of their rights as citizens as well, and they have a say in different things. Like there's a big, for example, especially with microhydro communities, a lot of indigenous communities have been participating in protesting dams, for example, right? And having electricity means they can organize better. They also have access to news and things like that, which gives them, better insight into how to organize themselves to protest, right? So all of this makes a big difference. Now, I haven't done a rigorous impact evaluation, but I think this all can definitely be linked back to having electricity access.
I can imagine all those kids that 10 years ago now are like young adults.
Yes.
I believe they have an story to tell. So pretty much you have a documentary writer.
Yes. Yeah.
And besides, if people want to make a narrative for a election campaign or something else, it's about how many societies and communities these small things actually impact. Now, going back to what we talk about energy sources and grids, I need to ask you this because it became like a huge narrative in other places. The SMRs. What are your thoughts and how that can be handled in Southeast Asia?
SMRs are.
The small model reactors from nuclear energy.
Ah, okay. This has not entered the energy access space.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't think it's something that we've looked at as a feasible technology.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you can give me a little bit more context on that.
So instead of having the big nuclear reactors, now you have smaller ones in let's say, orders of magnitude smaller,
Okay.
like 1,000 smaller, but they can generate as much as a typical coal generator.
Okay.
Now the problem is, what do you do with the residuals?
Yeah.
So that's the biggest issue. It's not as much, but it generates as much electricity. Now, historically, the nuclear power plants has been greener, unless you have the Fukushimas, unless you have the Chernobyls. But that's one of the main narratives. Like, if you want to go greener and sustainable for a very high baseline that almost never sleeps, because that's a problem of the renewables. The baseline is not consistent. Then you can do SMRs. Even they began to talk that if you want to go deeper in the space exploration, you need SMRs.
Yeah.
Or do superconductors. But that's a topic for another talk.
Yeah. So I mean, this hasn't entered the energy access space yet. I think in the energy access space, the prevalent technology or the dominant technology has been solar, and this has, I think, there are interesting discussions around this as well, because actually, depending on where you are, of course, certain locations might have better solar resources than microhydro, for example, right? But in places where they have both, and the decision comes down to which one do you want to do, microhydro is more intensive in terms of it does require local participation, local engagement, because it's built into the environment, right? And then and then also it has to be maintained regularly, where solar is a lot easier to just kind of parachute in, install, and then just requires like minor maintenance, just cleaning the panels and stuff like that. So actually when we come across communities where both technologies are possible, then it becomes a discussion of which one is more suited to the local context. Is the community organized enough to maintain a microhydro system? Can it also be integrated into their existing institutions and their governance structures? Or would solar work better? Because maybe the community doesn't want to be as involved, or maybe there's a specific reason why solar might be better. The thing is, though, there's a lot of the international community tends to prefer solar because it's easier to implement, and easier here means it's there's not a lot of civil works. You don't really require the local community to be as technically capable to take care of it and things like that. And then there are issues in that in itself, where when the international community prefers a certain technology, the investment that flows is more for that technology. And then there's also in different countries, it also means that it's easier for the international community to come in and implement those solutions rather than it be homegrown and local. So there's also those interesting sort of very, it's an interesting discussion when we talk about the energy access space.
Ayu, you mentioned something very important because you emphasize how paramount is the community, because they are the ones who are supposed to maintain this in the long run, and how disconnected the international community is when they want to impose certain narratives. So we see right there a disjunctive why the international community doesn't address the same way and also the same scale as you and your colleagues actually address, which is you're giving power to the community, not because of energy, but also, hey, you have the choice right now to be on your own.
Yeah.
I believe that is even more powerful than just to say, today we're going to do solar, but tomorrow we're going to do SMRs or something in between.
Yeah, this is actually where we sit, like, as in it is this main issue or problem that is why we do what we do. So our software, which is called the Community Energy Toolkit, or COMET for short, it is a simulation-based software that we use in community workshops.
Okay.
And in community workshops, we run these scenario-based modules, and we allow for the community to explore and to build consensus around different solutions, different addressing different problems in the mini-grid sort of development area. And we feel like this, we're trying to deploy this tool widely because we want this to be mainstream, because we think that this is another way to get the community involved in a lot of these discussions, which they right now are not involved in. When you do project development, you go in, you run surveys and questionnaires to try and ask the community what they're going to use. It's a one-way transaction, though, right? You're just there to ask questions. The community gives you their input, and then you go away and you design your system. What we want is we want project developers, donor organizations, portfolio owners to use something like COMET instead, to go to the community, have these workshops, get data as well. The software, it's a software, so it's a digital solution, so it gives you data, right? But it gives you contextual data, nuanced insight. So it gives you all these ways to peek into the community when you normally wouldn't be able to with just surveys and questionnaires, and then use that for your project design and your development. So then it would give you a good sense of, is solar really the best solution for this community if they have access to a microhydro system or microhydro resources, or is solar the best solution? It gives you all these contexts and insight to make those decisions. That's what we're trying to do, a different way of doing things. Yeah.
So COMET has like a space related name because of the comets.
I didn't notice that, but you're right. Yes, the name.
I'm not right. I just pointed that out.
Yeah, yes.
It is really fascinating because all of a sudden we have Ayu, the space explorer, and Ayu, the energy entrepreneur, together, rather.
Yes. I will say that the way we selected the name, it was quite a democratic process in the
Uh-huh.
team. We had a whole, we workshopped it.
Okay.
Everyone came up with different names.
So there were other names as well.
There were other names, yeah, yeah, but we landed on Comet. Landed on Comet. Comet
Although-
will land on us.
Yeah, here goes the Armageddon reference again.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I'm realizing the connection now, and it's quite funny.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be thinking about it all night, like just laughing
Well,
to
maybe
myself.
maybe now you have a new purpose to redesign the logo. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, subconsciously, right? Like probably, yeah.
Now, before we started the episode, you mentioned you have a tour or a time in the Emirates. So, can you recall that time and how that connected to what is your present self?
Yeah. So I told you I went back to school to get another degree,
Uh-huh.
and that was in the UAE. So I was, so I got another master's degree from the Master Institute in Abu Dhabi, and that was in the early days of Master Institute. So before, when it was still in partnership and collaboration with MIT, before it had. Right now, it merged with Khalifa University and Petroleum Institute, so it's now all Khalifa University. But before, it was Master Institute on its own, and it was a good time. I had a good time there because um, it was much like this, in the early days. Professors were from MIT. It was a good program. We had a lot of freedom to do research, and so that's why I was able to focus my research on community energy, which I don't think would have been as easy to do anywhere else. We had a lot of resources as well to do it. I did a lot of field work. I could have access to whatever I needed for my research, so it was a good time. Yeah.
Now, that was back then, but we all know and we heard that okay, Dubai and Abu Dhabi has been growing up ever since. What are your thoughts about that region and how it's influencing the other parts of the world?
Yeah. Um, I've been receiving this question quite a bit because Dubai is hosting COP this year, and Dr. Sultan is leading it. And coming from the Master Institute, Dr. Sultan was like our benefactor, and I think that we have to recognize that the UAE has contributed quite a bit to the renewable energy sector, right? With IRENA, and a lot of push from the government to scale renewables, bring down costs of renewables, invest in renewables, um, and I think that a lot of times we forget how much they've invested in renewables,
Oh yeah.
and so I think that we forget this also because of the region in itself being very oil and gas heavy. I mean, they've been able to do this because of oil and gas, right? They've been able to have the funds to invest in renewables because it all came from oil and gas. But I think that was a smart thing to do. Like, you have countries like Malaysia, which is a gas country, and we have not invested at the same level in renewables. We've just continued to depend on it. Right? So I have high hopes that countries like the UAE will continue to do this, and then of course with the rest of the world kind of keeping it in check as well, right? And making sure that it's going in a direction that globally we want. So that's this kind of my opinion, yeah, that I'm hopeful because just take the Master Institute for example, a whole sort of generation of energy practitioners like myself who have gone out into the world to promote renewables and advance it. Yeah, so it's a big deal.
And if I may to put this sustainable renewables,
Yeah.
because it's not just throwing the renewables and then hoping for the best. It's like the actual community make sure that this actually works. Now, talking right now with a woman who travels through time from places that they don't have electricity, and you made them get electricity. And also a woman who travels through space, through many different regions. I want to ask you, which are the little differences you have seen between the Americas, the Middle East, and here Southeast Asia?
The differences?
The little
The
differences.
little differences. That's an interesting question. I have always tried to, I guess, walking the path that I have, I definitely think that I was able to take advantage of the strongest cultures and the strongest things from different places that I've been. Right, like for example, in the U.S., there's always this sort of push for knowledge and thirst to do more, right? Which I think I definitely learned from there. And then being in China with Schlumberger, it's looking at everything and feeling like there are better ways to do things, right? And China does that in their own regard, in their own way, not necessarily my way, but they do it in their own way. The UAE was a very interesting place because I felt like it was just this mix of everything, right? And they're still in their own way trying to find their own national identity as well. They're a young country, right? But there's a lot of possibility, right, in the UAE. And it was a great place also for a female engineer to be. That's where I had my son. So I was, a new mother in the UAE. Big family culture. So definitely, I think if I had my son, say, in the US, it would have been a very different experience because in the UAE, it was sort of allowed, right, to have a child and still continue working, and there was a lot of flexibility, a lot of allowances for that, and they are actually doing quite a bit for female STEM. I mean, if you look at like even their space industry, and if you look at all the engineers, many of them are women actually. So the majority of them are women, not men. And so these are things which I feel like don't get enough attention by anyone outside of that region, and they just kind of do it quietly, right? And then coming back to Malaysia, of course, in Malaysia, it's this is my own country, and so there's that big sort of wanting to serve, right, my country, and wanting to do more. And I think all of these things put together is where I am right now. And yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden we give by granted, look at that, everybody's the same. Like if we are from another planet, humans, they're all the same. They can be the same, they have differences, and it's through the differences that unites all of them.
Yeah.
Which is very, very singular in this small dot in the universe. Now, across your career, you faced some challenges, you faced some setbacks. I need to ask you, which was the most challenging compromise you ever met, and why was that?
Challenging compromise. This is a difficult question.
You can
Yeah.
take as much time as you want.
Yeah, it's a difficult question because I don't like being told I can't do something because I'm always going to try and find a way to do it. That's something that I've learned about myself in the last couple of years. When someone says like, "Oh, it can't be done," I'm like, "Oh, no, there has to be a way to do it." So there are definitely challenges, but also being an engineer, I think I am pragmatic as well, as to when I come up against challenges, it's always about trying to figure out, well, what are the core issues here that are at play, and trying to see, well, what can we adjust towards, right? And with energy is a very political thing as well. So it's a very not everything has technical solutions, right? And it is actually about understanding people, understanding relationships, understanding what are the sort of, whenever there are challenges, it's always about someone or some faction, kind of in a position of losing something, right? Like, and you're trying to play this game and challenge. And so I don't know what biggest compromise I've made. I don't think if there have been, I've just kind of taken it as in stride and just, okay, well, on to the next thing, right? So I haven't come across anything just yet that I feel like that was a big enough compromise to have shifted my path or anything like that. Yeah, so far I haven't come across anything yet.
That's good to hear.
I hope it'll continue like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because otherwise, when you see something that is like, hey, wait a second, let's put a pause. What is going on here?
Yeah.
Then you have that background, then you have that experience to say, hey, there is no need to compromise on this when you actually have the negotiation table.
Yes.
You have all the parties in common agreement.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best deal to do is to not do any deal at all. And
It's
everybody is better.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges right now, though, is when I look at being here in Malaysia. Like I said, like rural electrification or energy access is not a major priority here in Malaysia. And this has so far been, I think, one of the most challenging things is ideally you want the government to take it on, right? Because like you said, there's an ethical issue. It's also the idea of we heavily subsidize electrification for urban areas. Why aren't we doing it for rural areas as well? It's unfair, it's unjust, right? And so the ideal situation is if the government takes this on, allocates the budget for it, implements it, done. But that's not how it's going to go, right? So then the other way to do it is to do it without government support or government. They're not part of the solution. Although you want them to still accept the solution, though, because otherwise it will be impossible to do. So then you have to do it without them, which is, I guess, is a compromise, right? Because in other countries, there are countries where governments are involved in rural electrification, and maybe here not at that level.
Chances are, when we mention without the government, people will say, yeah, where the money come from? Private capital.
Yeah.
That can be a way. For example, nowadays, we know that the Nikkei index in Japan is going up because they all of a sudden have a lot of cash. They are opening the doors to foreigners to apply to become portfolio managers. They may say, yeah, we need to invest in these kind of companies that are giving a lot of energy. But at the same time, you are disconnected from the market. You are generating alpha, which is bigger returns than the average. You are beating the benchmark. That's a win-win. But the problem is, do you have enough information? So that's something that this new wave of energy entrepreneurship can actually help a lot. There is another point that I heard. Sanabil Investment in Saudi Arabia, they just disclosed their new limited partners. Sanabil is equivalent of Kasana. So their business is not to sit with money, it's to make the money work. So these other institutions, they can also see and this kind of, okay, these organizations, they need funding. And the government is not willing to help, well, private money can help.
Yeah, that's true.
So this is where we can actually say, oh, the finance people has been always bad, or look at that, the private equity, the wealth managers have been always bad. Well, this is where you can actually make the wealth to work for something. This is actually what Professor Cherian has been saying, that if we are teaching people to do the portfolio management, do it for good.
Yeah.
Because a lot of crime, Ponzi schemes, rock pulls, that makes the news. But hey, you help fund these initiatives, that's when you see more than just angel investment, you see something else that compounds through time. Yeah.
I would like to see more finance, more of the finance sector get involved in impact investing and more meaningful impact investing. I mean, I think that's already taking place right now. We need to constantly be developing, sort of new ways of doing it, right? That capture changing needs and things like that, and changing solutions as well, that take advantage of new things that are coming up and emerging. So I definitely think that yes, there is a future for it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, given that you are from Penang, I need to ask you. So, what is going on in Penang? So, if somebody from outside will say, Malaysia is going to be Kuala Lumpur, or maybe I want to do snorkeling in Sabah, but Penang, what is going on there?
Well, the food remains
Okay.
good.
Okay.
So that is, get that out of the way first. We're very serious about our food, and Penang food.
Especially because you are a little closer to Thailand, right?
So we do have influences from Thailand. Like we like our sour, spicy foods.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure what's going on economically or anything, because I haven't really been back to Penang in a while. But I mean, Penang is always going to be our food capital. I'm biased, so
It's fine.
yeah.
It's fine. Like I heard some people say that the best Chinese food outside of China is in Singapore, and
Ooh, okay.
and the best Indian food outside of India is in Malaysia. And it's
Okay.
like, that's good for you. But the infrastructure or what is going on with the tech ecosystem, a lot of people have been hearing to tell Penang is something going on.
I see. Oh, okay. I should look into that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also I need to give full disclosure to your speech back in energy class when you mentioned that you were calling for volunteers for those new expeditions. So can you tell us about those expeditions? How they usually happen?
Yeah, so we this year we are previously with COMET, our team would be the ones to go out and deploy the software. But this year, since we have we're transitioning into a into a mission-driven enterprise, a startup, and that means that we want to reach a certain level of scale. It means a lot more deployments than we're used to, and we have a small team, and so we've been. Right now, we have deployments in Nepal. We just finished some last week, and we have some more coming online next month. And then we're also hoping to start work in Fiji as well in July. And so that means that we need more people to run our COMET software and do these deployments. And so, yeah, we are looking for what we would consider project-based team members to join us, learn how to deploy the software, and then we will send you out to deploy it. Yeah.
So you hear it here first. Call for project managers or project-based volunteers. Just send some message in LinkedIn or email.
Yes. Sure.
You want to give something back? You have some time in the summer. Just do it.
Yeah.
Now, given that Southeast Asia itself is right now riding the wave of green investments, the Asian community, how do you see this effort getting coupled with the Asian community at all?
Well, I definitely am more of from the energy access space. So while I know that this is all happening, and I think that it's very positive, and I'm looking forward to how it plays out. In my line of work, I'm more interested in what this means for energy access in the region. We still have big populations in Myanmar and in different countries in Southeast Asia that are unelectrified, in Indonesia and Philippines and all of that. So while all these investments are happening, we also need to make sure that it flows into the energy access space, and that it becomes a part of the energy transition as well, because there's going to be no such thing as a just energy transition if we don't pay attention to energy access. I also think that that this region historically has done quite a lot when we talk about mini grids and energy access. But a lot of that has been um, from nonprofits. They've been grant based, and unlike our sort of colleagues in sub-Saharan Africa, we haven't really pushed for private, um, like a market-based solution to energy access in this region. And so I think that there are opportunities there. There are also opportunities to build on a lot of the experience that we have had from all these old first, second generation mini grids in Myanmar, in Indonesia, um, and then use that experience in to develop new market-based solutions. It does mean that some of our the way our policies and regulations are set up, some of those things need to change. I think in Southeast Asia we also traditionally have higher dependency on government, so some of that needs to change, and then government also needs to lend their support as well to change all these things as well. So I'm really hoping that this means that there's going to be more attention on the region, which also means that we can kind of pull some of the attention to the energy access space as well, and then maybe we can have the same level of investment and assistance that has gone into other regions in the world when it comes to energy access.
You mentioned about the region and about the access of energy. Given that I'm sitting with not only a time explorer but an space explorer and also an energy entrepreneur, which are the limitations of or the risk of being an entrepreneur in the region? Because it comes with a risk.
Yeah. I think, like I mentioned, because of this dependency, stronger dependency on government, a lot of times investors in the region are less. They find it a more risky investment, right? To move into the energy access space. One, because utilities usually have the mandate for electrification, and so you would be taking away something from, or this is perceived, right? This is how it's perceived. And then also the fact that our regulatory systems are not set up for decentralized systems to come in, and for the private sector to play a big role. And so I think these are some of the risks of being an entrepreneur in this region. Is you need to be aware of those things, and you need to learn it, and work within it. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned a keyword, decentralization, which is very popular in the fintech or the cryptocurrency space. But for you, it means something different.
Yes.
So, can you lay the ground and set the space to say what decentralization means to you in the
Yeah.
energy
So yeah, in our field, decentralized systems means distributed generation, and also from a systems perspective, not owned, managed, operated by a main utility, right? So it means from a technology perspective, it means distributed, so maybe not connected to the main grid. Smaller solar systems, smaller microhydro systems, even a generator can be is a decentralized system, right? It's not connected to the grid, and then the systems around it as well. So, like I said, it can be owned by a micro utility or a private developer, and it can be managed and operated by a private developer or even the community themselves. So all of this is also decentralized at that level. Yeah.
Yeah, that concept resonates especially with people in Texas. The ERCOT, they always are outside of the grid of the United States, but because they trade energy with other states or even with themselves. A biggest problem, and I can recall the Valentine's Day of 2021, because right after it was an ice storm.
Okay.
People began to complain because ERCOT couldn't manage. They were a little too dependent on renewable energy or gas, and these conversations actually led to an absence of electricity. All of a sudden, you got people in the middle of the ice storm cannot get back to their own homes, in lines just to get bread. So, when you mention that there is these solutions that can actually help
Yeah.
bring energy in a decentralized way, That's not only money, but it's also freedom.
Yes, it's building resiliency,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it means that you are no longer dependent on the main grid. And in countries like Australia, Germany, Spain, there are lots of communities that are off the grid, right? And in Australia, if I'm not mistaken, they're actually taking people off the grid to increase sort of this, or decrease dependency on the grid and increase communities' resilience, yeah, in terms of energy and independence. Yeah. So this is definitely possible, and I think that this is when we talk about the grid of the future. It's going to be a combination of all of these things, right? It's not going to be just a centralized grid. That's not going to be how it works because we have, in order to have higher penetrations of renewable energy, it means that it's got to be a lot more flexible than it currently is. It's not going to be so rigid. And I think that depending on, geographical context, so all these distributed, decentralized solutions should come into play. And I think the quicker our governments start to recognize this, the earlier they can put it into their energy planning, and then also that's how they can start planning all these roadmaps, budgets, right? When we start seeing, okay, the energy system is going to be decentralized, democratized, um, and it's not just going to be governance; it's also going to be technological systems as well. Yeah.
These are fascinating topics, and sometimes I need to ask, what else are you working on right now? Are you writing a book? Are you writing a movie? Are you about to release a license for Netflix for an incoming series?
None of that. Although, if anyone's interested, please give me a call because I would love to like put together a documentary of our communities or things like, because it's such a, I mean, electricity is such a foundational thing, to modern development and services. You can't have communities go into the 21st century without electricity access. And a lot of times, people also say, well, then you're taking away their traditions and things like. And I think that depends on the community, right? Like if communities themselves say that they want electricity access, who are we to say that they shouldn't have it, right? It's actually not on us to say that. But a lot of times when we look at rural communities, they want to maintain their lifestyles, their traditions, at the same time also have electricity access. It's not either or. They want both, and that's what we should be, sort of getting on board with, right? Yeah.
You know, I really enjoyed this conversation, but I believe there is also some young Ajus watching this, enjoying this conversation as well. So I need to ask you this, because this young Aju will be trying to learn from you the most. What piece of advice will you give to your younger self?
I would tell my younger self that when I think of what I did in university engineering, I should not have limited myself to what I thought engineering was, right? In essence, engineering is just the ability to problem solve. I think that engineers of the future will require knowledge and understanding of finance, economics, development, all the social sciences, all of this, right? They have to be multi and interdisciplinary. And so I would say that for engineers of the future, do not think that your classroom experience begins and ends with your modeling and your calculus and your physics and all of that. You go out there and learn all these other fields, and it's just going to make you a much better engineer because it means that you're going to engineer systems for the future, right? Which are not just technology based; it's going to be people based. And if you want to design systems for people, you have to understand people, and you have to understand all these other fields as well. That's what I would tell myself.
That's a very powerful message and very beautiful message. I really enjoy doing this. How can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn under Ayu Abdullah, or you can go to our website. It's www.cometapp.net.
Well, Please take care, and for the people out there, please take care and see you when I see you. Bye. That's it.
All right. Perfect.